The rice was nearly done when I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I held the wooden spoon, stirring slowly, careful not to let it stick. That day felt ordinary, yet I had put in a little extra effort. I added grated carrot, caramelized onion, and a few sprigs of fresh parsley. Small touches, subtle gestures unnoticed by anyone. My son leaned against the kitchen doorway. He did not look at me. His arms were crossed, jaw clenched tight. He spoke words as if they belonged to a casual chat, as if they did not carry the weight capable of shattering a mother's heart. "Having you here makes no difference." I dared not turn around. I refused to see his face when he said it, not out of fear of his gaze, but because I did not want him to see mine. I took a deep breath, held back tears, and kept stirring the rice as if nothing had happened, as if those 7 words were not blades piercing straight through my soul. I stayed silent, yet inside, everything was breaking apart. I thought about replying but could not find the words. What do you say when the son you raised alone, for whom you gave your whole life, tells you your presence holds no value? We finished lunch without a word. He served himself first, not even waiting for me. His wife Emily came downstairs from the 2nd floor, phone in hand, smiling at something she had read. She greeted me with a brief nod and sat opposite Michael. They talked about work, a meeting, an invoice. I set the plates on the table, brought the pitcher of water, and served the portions. It was not my home, although I had lived there. It belonged to them, or rather, it was the house where I felt invisible. After clearing the table, I washed the dishes one by one in silence. My hands trembled slightly. The hot water could not warm me from within. Their words echoed in my mind repeatedly. "Having you here does not make any difference." I turned off the tap, dried my hands with an old cloth, and leaned on the countertop. When had my son turned into that? When had he stopped seeing me as his mother and began to view me as nothing more than a shadow taking up space? It had not always been like this. There was a time years ago when he was the one insisting I stay. After my husband died, his father, Michael, was the first to show up at the house. He brought food, spoke gently to me, and told me I should not be alone. "I do not want you to be sad, Mom. Come live with us. It will be better for you there. You will be cared for." At first, I resisted. I did not want to leave my home, my plants, or the memories. But the weight of widowhood and the sincere tone of my son's voice made it impossible to refuse. That is how I came to that house. They settled me into a room at the back with a window looking out onto the yard. Emily greeted me politely. The first few months were bearable. I helped in the kitchen, washed the laundry, and looked after the children when Emily was away. I felt somewhat useful, not entirely welcomed, but useful nonetheless. Michael would hug me when he came home from work. Sometimes he shared how his business was going, and he listened to me. But gradually, something shifted. It was subtle at first. A plate left on my spot at the table without being cleared away. "Don't worry, I'll do it." That sounded more like, "Don't you bother." Then came the closed doors, the avoidance of eye contact with me, the whispered conversations between the two of them. Whenever I entered the room, the laughter stopped as soon as they noticed I was there. I became invisible, not suddenly, but like the lights flickering off when the power goes out, struggling at first, then total darkness. Yet that morning, when I heard what he said, it dawned on me it was no longer just neglect. It was disdain, a polite way of telling me, "We don't want you here anymore." The night before, Michael had argued loudly on the phone with someone. I overheard from my room his voice rising, something about payments and a client who was leaving. Then the slam of the door. Lately, there were always slammed doors. Now I wonder if his bad mood had something to do with me. If my time was running out, if Emily had planted the idea in him that I caused trouble, burdens, or tension, or maybe he simply came to that conclusion on his own. I don't know. He never told me directly, but those words were unmistakable. Having you here makes no difference. I went up to my room after cleaning everything. I gently closed the door behind me. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I hugged my pillow like a frightened child. I did not cry. Not yet. I just stayed there staring at the wall, trying to figure out when I had become nothing more than a shadow. I remembered when Michael was little, how he used to cry whenever his throat hurt, and I would spend the night sitting by his bed with a damp cloth on his forehead. How he ran to me after school with crumpled drawings in his backpack saying, "Look what I made, Mom." I looked at each one as if it were a masterpiece. I thought about all the times I skipped meals so he could eat, the shoes I didn't buy so he could have his own, the times I sold my jewelry, my furniture, even my peace for his sake. But now it did not matter anymore. Then, for the first time in a long while, I felt something different. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was a small spark, a tiny warmth inside my chest. It was neither relief nor hope. It was something else altogether. It was dignity. That dignity which had been asleep for years, buried beneath mountains of silence, invisible efforts, and unreturned love. That night, I did not join them for dinner. I said I was not hungry. I locked myself away and wrote in a notebook, scattered words, memories, sentences I had never voiced aloud. I discovered I still had things to say, that my voice, though ignored, was still alive within me. I did not know what I would do next, but something was stirring. Something was waking up. It was not hatred, nor did I seek revenge. I simply longed to feel like a person again, to look into the mirror and see not a discarded mother, but a woman with a story, with courage, and the right to exist. Perhaps the world had shifted. Maybe children were no longer as they once were, or maybe I had allowed myself to be erased. I did not know. But that night, alone in my room with the distant hum of the television downstairs, I made a decision. I would no longer remain invisible. I was uncertain how, when, or with what strength. Yet that rice, that silent lunch, and that sentence from my own child ignited something inside me that would never be extinguished. When Michael was born, I was barely 20 years old. I was young, inexperienced, and afraid. My husband Rogelio worked as a laborer in a metal factory, coming home every day with a weary body and injured hands. Still, we had each other. When Michael arrived crying loudly, as if he already knew life would be hard, Rogelio looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "He is our engine, Emily, our engine to never give up." And so it was. Michael grew up surrounded by effort and sacrifice. I created his first toys from scraps of fabric, empty bottles, and jar lids. I prepared vegetable purees, following recipes from old magazines. When he fell ill, I spent entire nights by his side with a damp towel on his forehead and watchful eyes, unable to sleep. I committed every home remedy to memory, every detail endlessly rehearsed, a desperate mother's prayer, every moment filled with quiet pain. Michael did not speak much, yet Rogelio watched him with immense pride. He crafted a cradle with his own hands, and when Michael turned 5 years old, he made him a wooden horse with wheels. Michael would pull it around the entire house, saying, "Look, Mom, it moves fast like Dad." Their home was modest, consisting of a living room, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a backyard where they grew tomatoes and flowers. Despite its size, it was their entire world. Every crack in the wall held a memory. Every corner had been carefully cleaned and adorned with the little they owned, but with twice as much love. At 9 years old, Michael began to shine at school. He was bright and diligent. I would sit beside him doing homework, take him to the park carrying his books under his arm, and listen as he talked about planets and dinosaurs, as if he had discovered them himself. I told him, "You will be great, my son. You will go far." When Rogelio fell ill, Michael was 15 years old. I saw him break inside, yet he refused to show it. Rogelio's strength faded gradually. The factory did not pay for sick leave, and debts started piling up rapidly. I sold my sewing machine, my wedding ring, and even the television just to afford the medications. No one offered help. Our family distanced themselves. Only the three of us remained, enduring however we could. And when Rogelio passed away, Michael did not cry in front of anyone. But one night, I found him hugging his father's shirt, his face soaked with tears. I sat down beside him and said nothing, simply held him close. That silence spoke louder than any words ever could. It was at that moment he asked me to come and live with him. He had grown up and married Emily, a refined woman from a well-off family who never managed to hide her sense of superiority. They lived in a larger house with 2 floors, a front garden, and an open-plan kitchen. He told me, "Mom, I do not want you to be alone. Dad is no longer here. Come live with us. You will be better off here." And I went. Leaving behind my home, my plants, and the memories of Rogelio etched into every piece of furniture was difficult. But Michael asked me with such tenderness it broke my heart. He said he needed me close because he could not stand the thought of me being alone. As always, I said yes. At first, everything seemed fine. They gave me a room at the back with a small window, a bed, and a chair. I decorated it with my photos, my blankets, and my Bible. I woke up early, prepared breakfast, swept the entrance, and took care of the grandchildren when Emily went to the gym or the beauty salon. However, gradually the atmosphere began to shift. Michael stopped hugging me when he came home. Emily started criticizing my cooking, my advice, and the way I spoke. She claimed I spoiled the children, did not know how to use the washing machine properly, and made noise in the mornings. I remember one day I served lunch and Emily stared at my lentil stew, pushed it with her fork, and said, "Poor people's food again." Michael said nothing, simply lowered his head and continued eating. I did not respond, swallowing the humiliation along with the same spoonful of lentils. They began leaving me alone. They would leave without warning, return late, and ignore me. The grandchildren grew up thinking I was the woman who helped, not their grandmother. Once I overheard one of them ask, "Why does Grandma not have a home?" And Emily replied, "Because she did not know how to take care of what was hers." I stood in the hallway and heard everything. Michael started speaking to me coldly. He no longer asked if I needed anything, nor did he listen to my stories. One day he entered my room without knocking and said, "Emily and I believe you should start looking for another place. You are no longer comfortable here." Just like that, as if I were a bothersome object, as if the years I gave him meant nothing. I said nothing, just nodded and closed the door. That night I cried silently, not because of the rejection, but because I had deceived myself into believing he would always be my son. Since then, everything I did seemed to irritate them. If I cooked, they complained about the smell. If I cleaned, they criticized the noise. If I spoke, they mocked my tone. And if I remained silent, they claimed I was in a bad mood. One night, Michael came home late, his face strained, a phone pressed to his ear as he argued with someone. He glanced at me as he passed by and said, "Are you still awake?" No good night, no smile, only reproach. The next day, he said it, right there in front of the rice, face to face, in my hands, which struggled to keep alive a routine that no longer belonged to me. Having you here did not make a difference. Those words did not come out of nowhere. They were the result of months of indifference, of hidden disdain beneath polite gestures, of silences filled with judgment, yet they hurt more than I had imagined. After that, I closed myself off in my own world. I began to write in an old notebook. I recalled moments, wrote letters I would never send, sentences and unanswered questions. I clung to something I could not quite name. Dignity, perhaps memory, identity. One afternoon, sitting by the window, I saw the neighbor from Mio Scent next door, an older woman like me, leave with a small suitcase. She was leaving, but she walked upright with a determined look. She reminded me of myself years ago when I confronted the doctors who refused to admit Michael. I remembered being brave, capable. That was when I realized I was not finished yet. I did not know what I would do, but I knew I could not stay like that, slowly fading away every day. And so, the seed of a plan, a possibility, was born. A buried memory came back to me that night. A paper hidden in a drawer, a writing, something Michael had told me before he died. This house is as much yours as mine. Do not let anyone take away what is also yours. I opened the drawer, searched, and found it. My name was there beside his. I held that paper in my hands as if it were a talisman. I read it once, twice, 10 times. I could hardly believe my name appeared alongside Rogelio's. That house, the one I had left for love, for obedience, for a mother's affection, was still partly mine. I am not referring to a physical building, but to the home we built through sacrifice, brick by brick, month after month, skipping certain meals to afford others. I had given up that space without demanding anything. I left with just a suitcase and some photos, leaving behind our double bed, the armchairs, and the cupboard Rogelio made for me when we celebrated 20 years of marriage. I left thinking Michael needed me. I left because I believed love was more important than property. And now, while holding that document, I realized something. I had never stopped having rights. But beyond the paper, beyond the signature, what shook me inside was understanding they had made me feel undeserving, as if time had erased me, as if growing old took away my story. From that day, my perspective changed. I said nothing. I showed nothing, but I watched, listened, and felt. Michael continued with his cold manners and distant voice. Emily barely spoke to me. The grandchildren avoided me. My presence was a useful ghost, someone who set the table, cleared the dishes, swept the floor. But I was not family to them, not in their eyes. One Sunday during lunch, I overheard Emily talking about selling the house and moving to a more upscale neighborhood. Michael nodded, saying it was time for a change and that the house no longer reflected who they were. They never mentioned a word about me. It was as if I did not exist, as if I did not live there. I swallowed my anger but began to write everything down. Conversations, remarks, dates. I decided that if they wanted to play dirty, I would respond with cleverness. Days later, I accidentally found out that Michael had started legal procedures to claim full ownership of the house. He used false claims, saying I had given it to him. A lie. I never signed anything, never gave up my rights, but he trusted that I would do nothing and remain silent. That night, I could not sleep. I sat on the chair by the window and watched the shadows of the trees moving across the wall. I thought about Rogelio, what he would have done, what he expected from me, and I knew the moment had come to stand up for myself. I called Emily. She had been my friend since our youth. One of those friends for whom time stands still, but the soul remains intact. I found her number in an old address book. She was still living in the city. Her voice was emotional, surprised when she answered. She told me she often thought about me. I shared part of what was happening. Not everything, not yet. We met at a cafe in the city center. I brought the paper to her, told my story. She cried with me, took my hand, and said, "Delma, you are not alone. We will fix this." Emily had connections. She knew a reliable lawyer. Her name was Constanza Villalba, was a woman with a serious face and a piercing gaze. When I showed her the document, she raised an eyebrow and said, "This is clear. You own 50% of the property. They cannot sell it without your approval. If they try, they are committing fraud. I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief because I had support. Fear because I knew what was coming. I knew Michael and Emily well. I understood that they would not just stand by. I returned home and remained silent. I did not confront anyone or mention anything, but I began to take photos, record conversations, make copies of the document, and hide evidence in different places. Not out of paranoia, but out of careful planning. Then something happened that broke me inside. One night, I overheard a conversation. Michael was speaking on the phone, thinking I was asleep. He said he was tired of having me there, that all he wanted was to get rid of me, and that he had no intention of sharing anything with me. This is my house, my effort, my life. She has already had enough. She does not deserve anything else. That night I cried, but it was different now. It was no longer sadness. It was wounded dignity. It was fire. I could not sleep or eat. The next day, I walked around the house as if it no longer belonged to me. But inside me, something was growing a new strength, an ancient courage. That same week, I received a court notice. Michael was suing me. He claimed that I had invaded his property, that I was a burden, that I refused to leave, and that I contributed nothing financially. He painted me as a manipulative old woman. When I read that, something inside me shattered, not because of the message itself, but because of the disdain, the coldness in the signature, the silence of their conscience. I went to see Constanza, sat opposite her holding the envelope, and said, "I am ready, take me to the end." And so, the battle began. It was a war without shouting, without violence, a war fought with documents, truths, witnesses, and words, heavy with meaning. Emily found out. She looked at me with hatred. She said I was destroying her family. I answered with a phrase I had been holding back for days. The family broke apart the moment they stopped seeing me as a mother. I walked to my room, closed the door, and started to pray. Not for them, but for myself. So I wouldn't lose my way. So I wouldn't become what they were. Michael tried to speak, but it was not to reconcile. It was to negotiate. He offered a small sum if I gave up half. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "This is not about money. This is about respect, about what you once were." He never spoke to me again. The trial was approaching. Constanza was preparing every detail. Azucena accompanied me to each meeting. I felt scared, yes, but also alive, as if after so many years, someone was finally giving me back my voice. Then, as if fate wanted to test me further, Michael showed up one morning with the grandchildren. He had told them I was going to abandon them, that I wanted to keep the house all to myself. They looked at me with sadness and confusion. "Is it true, Grandma?" one of them asked. My heart broke, yet I did not lie. I bent down, took his hands, and told him, "The truth always comes out, and when you grow up, you will understand." Michael took the children away without saying a word, and I remained there in the kitchen with trembling hands, but a steady soul. Because sometimes to be free, you must allow others to hate you. On the day the trial began, I felt like my legs were made of paper, not out of fear of losing, but because I realized I was sitting there facing my son, not as a mother, but as an adversary. Michael did not look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on his phone with a furrowed brow as if I did not exist. Emily was by his side, flawless and cold as an ice sculpture. I sat on the other side next to Constanza, my heart beating like a war drum. The room was small and without an audience, only the parties involved and the judge. But to me, it seemed like a Greek theater, a stage where tragedy would unfold. Michael's lawyer began and said that I had been a burden for years, contributing nothing, interfering in the family dynamics, causing constant conflicts. He claimed that Michael only wanted to restore peace to his home. She portrayed him as a generous son who, after his father's death, had opened the doors to his mother, but now suffered due to her invasive presence. I closed my eyes. Every word felt like a dagger. Then Constanza stood up and in a clear, unwavering voice began to speak about the true story. She revealed the real truth. The documents proved that I was the rightful owner of half the house. Evidence was presented showing that Michael had tried to hide this fact when he began the sale process. Recordings surfaced where he expressed a desire to get rid of me. His words were cruel, cold, and devoid of compassion. The judge listened carefully, taking notes, casting increasingly uneasy glances at Michael, until the moment came that changed everything. Constanza requested permission to introduce an unexpected witness. She entered the room calmly. Not only was she my friend, but she was also a retired social worker with extensive experience in domestic violence and neglect issues. She spoke with a strength that shook the courtroom, explaining that what I was enduring was a form of silent emotional abuse. Many older women are stripped of their space and dignity under the guise of family assistance. She emphasized that this case was not isolated, but was urgent. Michael began to fidget in his seat, whispering to his lawyer. Emily pressed her lips together tightly. The judge called for silence. Azucena concluded her testimony with words engraved in my soul. Love is not measured by what one gives, but by what the other does not demand after you have given everything. The hearing was suspended until the following week to consider precautionary measures. We left the courtroom in silence. Michael passed by me as if I were invisible. Emily shot me a look filled with pure hatred, but I did not lower my gaze. We returned home, a house divided by resentment. I entered through the main door while they came in from the back. Nobody spoke a word. That night, we slept under the same roof but lived in completely different worlds. The following day, a letter arrived for me. It was an official notice stating that from that moment on, Michael and Emily were forbidden to carry out any sales transactions regarding the property. They could not even move a single brick without my legal permission. That house no longer belonged solely to them. It was now ours. I had reclaimed the half that rightfully belonged to me. I thought this would stop them. I was wrong. The psychological games began. Silence grew heavier. Their glances became harsher. They hid things from me and excluded me from conversations. One day, I found my photos thrown in the trash, my belongings rearranged. They were trying to wear me down, hoping I would give up, but I did not. When a woman has been erased so many times, there comes a moment when she learns to write her name in fire. I devoted myself to reclaiming my story. I pulled out old albums and started writing a diary. Every night I poured onto pages what I had experienced, how I felt, and what I remembered. It was my way of staying sane, of never forgetting who I was. It was during that time that I received an unexpected call. It was Mariano. He had been a friend of Rogelio's and also mine, a widower and lonely man. He told me Azucena had said I was struggling. He asked if I wanted to meet for a coffee. At first I hesitated, but I went. We met in a small cafe near the park where we used to walk 30 years ago. Seeing him brought a strange feeling. It was not love, it was acknowledgement, like reconnecting with a part of yourself that had been asleep. We talked for hours about life, death, children, and betrayal. He did not judge me nor offer advice. He simply listened. In his eyes, I found something I thought was lost: respect. I returned home with a knot in my chest. Not from sadness, but from hope. I started seeing him once a week. It was not a romance, it was a sanctuary, a truce from the world. But Michael noticed it. One night, as we were having dinner, he threw a phrase like a stone against glass. "How embarrassing, Mother, at your age going out with another old man. You have no shame." I froze. Emily laughed quietly. The grandchildren lowered their heads. I did not respond. I stood up and went to my room, but the next day I went to the notary. I asked Constanza to start the paperwork to sell my share of the house. Legally, I had the right, and I had found a buyer, a calm widower looking to move to a more central area. His name was Mariano. That would be my revenge, not taking everything from them but forcing them to live with what they despised. When Michael heard the news, he went mad. He said I did it to destroy him. He screamed and threatened, but there was nothing he could do. The judge had ruled in my favor. The sale was legal. Emily tried to negotiate. I told her it was too late. In less than a month, everything in the house had changed. Mariano moved out. Michael and Emily were forced to sell their share so they would not have to live with him. They lost money, they lost control, and I gained something much bigger. I gained my freedom. I moved into a small apartment with large windows, plants, and quiet. Sometimes I saw Mariano, sometimes I did not. What mattered was that finally, I was the owner of my own life. I did not have to shout or beg. I just had to remember who I was and make sure they remembered too. This was not a quiet victory or a permanent peace. Selling my part of the house was only the first step in a game that, without even knowing it, was just beginning. Michael and Emily, forced to sell their share for less than they expected, moved into a smaller apartment in a neighborhood they did not like, far from their children's private school and away from the luxuries they had once displayed like trophies. Even though I had no intention of causing more pain, they took it as a declaration of war. The first call came 1 week after I moved. It was Michael. I did not answer. Then messages arrived one after another, some pleading, others angry. "Are you happy now, Tata? You ruined us. My children will hate you because of this. You are not a mother. You are a traitor." I silenced the number. Blocking it seemed unnecessary. I wanted him to know I heard him, but it did not affect me. It was a new kind of language between us. We, the ones who used silence as a shield, yet did not stop moving forward. One Sunday morning, as I was leaving the supermarket, I found him waiting at my building's entrance. He did not shout or insult me. He spoke softly as if burdened by guilt. He told me he had lost everything, that his marriage was crumbling, that the children asked why their grandmother had abandoned them, and that Emily blamed him for not managing the situation better. Then, with tears shining in his eyes, he struck me with his harshest blow. "Mom, I need money." I felt the warmth drain from my face. I looked at him, hoping to catch a glimpse of the child I had raised, but there was nothing left. Only a broken man remained, not due to pain, but because of his wounded pride and shame from losing something he once thought was his. I answered with a steady voice without any hesitation. "I also lost many things, Michael, and I rebuilt myself alone. You can do the same." He said nothing else and walked away. That night, I found a handwritten note on my apartment door. It said, "You will regret this." There was no signature, but I did not need one. I knew exactly where it came from. I tucked the note away in the highest drawer where I used to keep letters from Rogelio. The following weeks turned into a series of small threats with calls from unknown numbers, visits from municipal inspectors alleging supposed irregularities in the apartment, and even a notification of a lawsuit for moral abandonment. Constanza explained to me that it was an old trick. It was used to exert emotional pressure on elderly parents. It was unlikely to succeed, but it still hurt deeply. What wounded me the most was seeing my grandchildren one afternoon from afar, crossing a street with their mother. I smiled at them. They looked at me puzzled, as if they did not recognize who I was, as though my name had been erased from their memory. Then I understood. The real fight was not about money or possessions. It was about my memory, about the right to exist within their story. So I made the decision to fight back. I went to Constanza's office and asked for her help, not in a legal sense, but emotionally, with facts and truth. We began to gather documents, photos, letters, anything that would prove I had not been a burden, but a present mother, a loving grandmother, a woman who had devoted her life to her family. Meanwhile, Mariano supported me with his calm presence. He did not get involved directly, but he offered something even more powerful, a space where I could breathe. We cooked together, listened to music, sometimes went to the park to watch the children play. He never asked if I wanted to love again. He never demanded anything. He only reflected back my pure self, and that was enough. One afternoon, upon returning home, I found yet another letter, this time from Emily. It was written with cold precision. She accused me of manipulating Michael, of destroying their family and being the cause of all their misfortunes. The letter ended with a direct threat. If I did not provide them with financial compensation, they would use the children against me. "You will never see them again," I said. I sat down, took a deep breath, and decided it was time to speak up. I requested a court hearing, not to file a claim of emotional abandonment, but to ask for a restraining order. Yes, against my own son and his wife, it was not easy. Constanza looked at me silently when she heard my request. She did not judge me. She simply asked if I was sure. I told her I was tired of living in fear. I do not seek revenge. I only want to be left to live in peace. And so, about a month later, I returned to the courtroom, this time without trembling, without tears, holding my head high. Michael did not appear. Emily was there alone, dressed in black, as cold as always. She did not speak or look at me. The judge listened to my arguments, the evidence, the note, the intimidating visits, the attempts at emotional blackmail. My statement was brief but resolute. I said I was not there to punish anyone, only to protect what remains of myself. The order was granted. Michael and Emily were prohibited from coming within 200 meters of me, calling me, writing, or sending intermediaries. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months, but peace is never guaranteed forever. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was a social worker. She told me that the children wanted to speak with me, that they wanted to understand why their grandmother was no longer around. They missed my stories, my cookies, and my hugs. In that moment, I realized my next battle would not be against Michael or Emily, but for memory itself. My grandchildren kept things from me. It was time to rebuild that bridge, even if it was stone by stone. The morning of the final trial began with a gray sky, but not the kind that warns of a storm. It was a gentle gray, the kind that makes the world seem paused. I woke up early without an alarm. I had slept little, but not because of anxiety. It was more a mix of anticipation and accumulated fatigue. I looked at myself in the mirror. I appeared thinner and older, too. Yet my eyes held something different. They were no longer the eyes of a wounded woman, but those of someone who had survived. Michael accompanied me to the courthouse door. He did not want to enter. He hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Today you are not defending yourself. Today you are standing up." I went inside alone. Emily was already waiting for me, impeccable, serene. She gave me a look that said it all. We are here now. There is no turning back. The trial was not about money. It was about memory, dignity, and the chance to stop being a shadow in the history of those I had raised. Michael did not show up. I was not surprised. Emily did arrive, accompanied by a young lawyer with a scared, boyish face. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a few officials, the judge, a woman taking notes, and us. That was enough. Emily spoke first. Her statement was neat and rehearsed. She presented herself as a concerned mother, a selfless wife, not misunderstood. She said she had done everything possible to keep family harmony, that the situation had been unstable, unpredictable, even hostile. He mentioned illnesses I never had, accusations I never committed. He spoke about how his children cried at night, how his marriage had fallen apart ever since I chose to become part of their lives. He did not shed tears, nor did he raise his voice. It was the most dangerous kind of poison, the one delivered calmly. Then it was my moment. I stood up. I did not read any notes nor carry any papers, only my voice. Your Honor, I am here because I grew tired of being invisible. For many years, I believed love could conquer everything, that a mother must forgive, remain silent, and wait. I raised my son mostly alone while my husband was away traveling. I gave him education, warmth, nourishment, and above all, a home filled with affection. When my husband passed away, my son asked me to move in with him. I never requested it. He insisted. He told me they needed me, that I would be welcome. Naively, I believed it was true. I swallowed my pride, but soon I realized they did not want me. They tolerated me. I became invisible. I was no longer the mother they listened to, but the old woman who was in the way. They silenced me, ignored me, until one day, while serving lunch, my son looked at me and said, "Having you here makes no difference." He did not yell or hit me, but those words felt like a knife. I withdrew, not out of resentment, but from dignity. I could feel all eyes fixed on me, but I did not lower my gaze. After that, I faced threats, blackmail, and false accusations. Yet despite everything, I never wanted to hurt them. I only asked to be allowed to live in peace. Instead, what I encountered was more hatred and more manipulation. But today, I am not here to seek revenge. I am here to set the record straight. I want to protect my name. The judge nodded silently and did not ask any questions. Emily requested to submit letters from Michael, photographs of my son as a child, school notes signed by me, and drawings from the children where I appeared as the best grandmother in the world. It was evidence after evidence showing that I was not a burden, but family, unjustly pushed aside for convenience. Emily remained still, but her lawyer stood up to speak. He claimed all of this was emotional and that legally there was no foundation. He insisted that my restraining order was enough and said this was merely an attempt to clean my reputation. Then the judge spoke for the first time. Maybe that is true, but sometimes clearing a reputation is also about doing justice. Mrs. Perez, would you like to add anything more? I nodded and took out from my bag the last letter from my grandchildren. A social worker had given it to me a few days earlier. It was written in childish handwriting. "Grandma, we miss you. We want to come to your house. Mom says we cannot because you did something bad." I took a deep breath and answered the judge firmly. I do not want them to think I did something wrong. I want them to be able to read this when they grow up and know that I love them and fought for them even when they turn their backs on me. The judge closed the case and made an immediate decision. The restraining order remained, but he granted visitation rights. Michael supervised the children whenever they asked for it. He never forced anyone, but offered an open door. Outside, the afternoon was beginning to brighten. The sky remained gray, though it was less dense. I felt a kind of trembling in my legs, not from fear, but relief. It was as if, for the first time in a long while, I had freed myself from an unseen burden. Emily was waiting for me at the cafe across the street. When she saw me enter, she stood up. She did not ask how things had gone, simply took my hand and ordered 2 coffees. "And now, what will you do, Delma?" she asked with a gentle smile. I looked at her, and for the first time in years answered without hesitation, "I am going to live." That night, I opened a drawer where I stored old things. I took out photographs, recipes, letters. I packed a box for the children. It was not an attempt to reclaim the past, but a seed, something they would discover when they grew up. Maybe then they would understand that I was not perfect, but I was real. I was their grandmother, their mother, and a woman, and no one could take that away from me. The weeks following the trial were neither peaceful nor hostile. They were empty. a kind of void that makes no noise but feels like a hollow in the chest. I woke up not knowing how to spend my time without tasks, without children to care for, without meals to prepare. For the first time in years, the silence in my home was complete. There were no laughter sounds, no crying, no doors slamming shut, no commands or demands. At first, that silence felt awkward, but gradually it started to become a form of companionship. A peculiar sense of peace began to take the place where anxiety once lived. Michael would visit me every Thursday. He arrived with sweet bread, perhaps an old movie tucked under his arm, and stories that made me laugh even when I did not feel like it. Sometimes we talked for hours. Other times, we just listened to music together, and in the quiet, I felt truly seen. Not as a burden, not as an annoying elderly woman. He recognized me as a woman, as Delma. One morning, without any plan, I went out for a walk. It had been months since I last roamed the neighborhood. Everything seemed altered now. The little shop where I used to buy sweets for Renatito was gone. The bakery had changed owners, yet the streets themselves remained familiar. I wandered to the park where I had taken my son when he was small. Sitting on a bench, I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply, and without warning, tears came. But these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of liberation. I cried because I was no longer afraid, because I had reclaimed something I thought was lost, the right to feel alive. That very day, I chose to redecorate the house. I threw away old belongings, clothes I no longer wore, photographs that no longer caused pain. I painted the walls, bought new curtains, and for the very first time, I hung a portrait of myself in the living room. This was not out of vanity, but a statement. It was saying, "This house belongs to me, and so do I." Emily kept writing to me. She sent clippings from newspapers. Newspapers had articles featuring older women who had fought hard for their rights. She told me, "Your story is not unique, but it is courageous." In one of her letters, she encouraged me to write, "Not for publishing, only for yourself." I began with small notes, scattered words, then sentences, and finally full pages until one afternoon, without realizing it, I had written over 100 pages. It was my raw story without any embellishment, honest and personal. Marilu, a retired woman who lived on the corner and was one of my neighbors, found out I was writing. She asked to read something, and although I hesitated, I agreed. 2 days later, she returned with teary eyes. She said, "This is not just yours, Delma. It belongs to many. It is mine, too." I was speechless. She hugged me, and that embrace felt different. It was not pity, but respect and a deep connection. We started meeting on Saturdays at my place, just her and me at first, and later 3 more neighbors joined us. They brought mate, cookies, and tea. We shared stories, pains, and small victories. In that circle of women, I realized something I had never clearly seen before. I was never truly alone. One rainy afternoon while making coffee, I received an unexpected call. It was a quiet, shy child's voice. I felt my heart stop. "Grandma, it's me, Renatito. Can I come see you?" I was silent, choking back tears I did not want him to hear. I told him yes, of course, whenever he wanted. The next day he showed up with a social worker, taller, thinner, but with the same eyes. He did not run to hug me. He stood still, holding his backpack. I invited him inside and made some hot chocolate for him. He drank it quietly. Then, as if he needed to get everything out at once, he said to me, "Dad says you are sick. That is why we could not see you. But the lady who takes me to school told me that sometimes adults say ugly things when they are angry. Is it true that you are sick?" I took his hand and told him, "No, my love, I am not sick. I am just sad sometimes, but that happens and it is not your fault." He nodded, looked down, and said, "I am sad too." Then he started to cry. We cried together, as if no time had passed, as if nothing had been broken. He stayed just 1 hour, but it was enough. When he left, he promised to come back. I did not know if he would keep that promise, but just hearing it was enough for me. The following days were different. I had new energy, a new reason. I began to go out more, to talk to people, to look them in the eyes, to smile without fear. One day, Michael showed up at my door without warning. I saw him from the window. I hesitated before opening the door, but I did, not for him, but for myself, to prove that I was no longer broken. "Mom, I need to talk," he said in the tone he used when he was a kid and had done something wrong. I did not invite him in. He stayed standing at the threshold. I heard that Renatito came. The assistant told me I had not allowed it, and I did not like it. I crossed my arms and said, "I am not here to argue with you. If you want to say something, say it. If not, then leave." He seemed taken aback by my determination. "Dad left you some things, a property, a piece of land. I'm not sure if you knew about it." I looked at him. I could not grasp his intention, and I want to sell it, but for that I need your signature. There it was, the real reason as usual. And if I do not sign, what will you do? Another false accusation? Another letter to the grandchildren? No answer. He told me having you here made no difference, and now you are selling my inheritance. Does that seem fair to you? He released me. I looked at him calmly. What seems fair to me, Michael, is that you stop lying. You are not here for justice. You are here for money. But you will not manipulate me anymore. No. Music. I closed the door without yelling, without insulting, and that was the last time I saw him. That night, while listening to an old tango, I realized something that made me smile. I did not feel pain. His disdain, his absence, his rejection no longer hurt me. What used to hurt was thinking I had failed as a mother, but I understood that I had not. I had done everything I could, more than I should have, and now I only wanted peace. I had regained my name, my space, my steps. And if one day the grandchildren wanted to come back, I would be there strong, present, but not waiting, because waiting also makes you sick, and I was finally healthy. After closing the door that last time, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. However, freedom did not arrive wrapped in roses or birdsong. It was quiet, almost invisible, unnoticeable yet as deep as an underground river that begins to flow and never stops. The house, which once seemed to me a sanctuary and later a prison, started to transform into my stronghold, a place where I could rebuild every fragment of myself that time and neglect had shattered. The walls held echoes of old laughter and tears. And now they also carried a new atmosphere, one gentler and full of hope. Each morning I woke with the resolve not to let anyone take away my dignity or my voice again. In the quiet of the early day, I wrote continuously about the past, about joyful and painful moments, about the lies and truths that had brought me to this point, and about the dreams I had not yet allowed to die. Writing gave me a strength no one could touch, the power to tell my story on my own terms. Yet life neither forgives nor waits. While I was healing, other battles brewed beyond my sight. Michael, cunning as ever, was not willing to give up. His silence was the calm before a storm. I received a letter from the law firm he had hired. The letter was a subtle threat, an attempt to pressure me into agreeing to his demands without resistance. He wanted me to sign over the sale of the land that my husband and I had bought years ago. That very land had been the hope for a peaceful and secure future for us. Signing would mean conceding to his control. Accepting that my ego and greed would dictate the rules of my life was something I simply could not allow. I refused to give in, yet I was not alone. Michael, my loyal friend, became my pillar of support. He guided me and explained that there were lawful ways to safeguard my assets and, more importantly, my dignity. Together, we sought out a lawyer who understood that this was more than a mere dispute over money. It was a battle for justice and respect, Amidst this chaos, I discovered a strength I thought had vanished. Every word of encouragement, every kind gesture, and each shared memory with the women in the neighborhood reminded me why this fight was worth it. The pressure intensified. Michael started sending subtle messages through his wife and friends to undermine my peace of mind. I heard rumors that he spoke ill of me, tried to isolate me socially, and manipulated Renatito to forget about me. Yet I no longer fell for his traps. His poison slid off me like water on the leaves of a sturdy tree. People in the community began noticing my transformation. Neighbors who used to merely greet me from a distance now came closer to talk, sharing their own tales of struggle and resilience. I became a quiet example that no matter the age or circumstances, it is always possible to be reborn. Meanwhile, Renatito visited more often. His innocence and affection were a soothing balm for my wounds. We did not speak much about Michael, but his presence was a constant reminder that some bonds are beyond even hatred. The legal battle nearly tore everything apart. It became a whirlwind that drained my time and energy, but not my determination. Every hearing felt like a battlefield where I defended not only my rights, but also my dignity. The judge listened carefully and eventually ruled that the land could not be sold without my explicit consent, as I held the legal rights to it. It was a bittersweet victory because I knew Michael would not accept the ruling without trying new tricks. Yet for me, it was proof that justice could still be on my side. That night, while gazing at the stars through my bedroom window, I realized that the real struggle was not with my son, but with the fear that had paralyzed me for years. Now that fear had become a distant memory. I allowed myself to dream again. I dreamed of traveling, reading books, and spending afternoons filled with peace and genuine laughter. I dreamed of a life where self-love was the focus, not a consequence. I decided then that I would sell that property, but not into Michael's hands or his schemes. I would sell it to buy a small apartment near the city center, a place to start fresh, where the walls held promises instead of sorrows. And so, I did. The money gave me that small freedom, a place to call my own, a personal sanctuary. Moving was both a symbolic and real act of rebirth. Every box I packed represented a chapter of the past that I was closing. Every item I put away marked a step forward. I chose to hold on to a part of myself that embraced me deeply. After settling in, I received unexpected calls and messages from friends of the past, neighbors, even Renatito, who called to share stories about his days at school. I felt surrounded by an unseen network of love and support. To my surprise, I found myself eager to learn new things, to go out, to be happy without relying on anyone else. The loneliness that once frightened me had now become a companion for reflection and personal growth. One day, while tidying up the kitchen, I came across an old photo of my husband and me, taken on that land which had been the center of so many conflicts. I gazed at it tenderly and whispered, "This is for you, so you know I have finally found peace." I had no idea what the future would hold, but I was sure of one thing: no harsh words, no betrayal. Not even the contempt of a child could take away the dignity I had reclaimed through so much effort. From afar, the shadow of Michael still lingered, but it no longer held power over me. I had learned to stand strong, to protect what belonged to me, and most importantly, to love myself. That was my greatest victory, and as life went on, for the first time in a long time, I felt free and whole. After years of feeling invisible under the same roof as my own son, after enduring his words that pierced me like invisible daggers, the moment had finally come to take control of my life. When I made the choice to sell the house that had long been the battleground of my self-worth, it was not an impulsive act. It represented the end of a lengthy, painful, yet essential journey. That home, once a warm refuge for Michael and me, had transformed into a constant reminder of betrayal and disdain from Michael. Now, armed with legal authority and the encouragement of Mariano alongside others who believed in me, I felt prepared to conclude that somber chapter. The selling process was filled with both nostalgia and optimism. Every corner, every wall, every window held echoes of better days, laughter and dreams once shared with my family, but also carried the heavy shadow of humiliation and neglect. Signing the sale documents, I experienced a freedom beyond words. It was proof that I was no longer trapped by a past that had caused me tremendous pain. With the money I gained, I moved into a modest apartment, which, though simple, became my sanctuary. Every item I placed, every piece of furniture stood as a symbol of my fresh start. Independent, free, and worthy. The initial nights were the hardest. Loneliness surrounded me tightly, yet it also granted me the chance to hear my own voice and reconnect with myself. I realized how long I had lived trying to fulfill the expectations of others. To endure the selfishness of a son who never truly appreciated the woman who gave him life was a challenge. As the days passed, fear gradually gave way to a renewed sense of trust. I began to go out more often to revisit old hobbies I had left behind and to find joy in small moments that had once gone unnoticed. The scent of coffee in the morning, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the comfort of a book held in my hands. The relationship with Michael belonged to the past, broken beyond repair. He continued with his life, trapped by his pride and unable to admit his mistakes. I, on the other hand, became the woman I always wanted to be, strong, confident, able to say enough without guilt. Mariano became an invaluable support, offering not only legal help but emotional strength as well. His genuine friendship showed me that it is never too late to rebuild healthy connections, and that true love never demands sacrifices that destroy the soul. My grandson, Renatito, remained a bright ray of light amid so much darkness. Despite the distance that grew between Michael and me, I always worked to keep a close relationship with him, understanding that a grandmother's love is a treasure that not even betrayal can extinguish. Yet life did not stop there. As I grew and healed, I began sharing my story with other women experiencing similar hardships. I found in our shared pain a transformative power. I took part in support groups where I offered my experience as guidance and hope, a testimony that it is possible to move forward and that dignity is an undeniable right. In those meetings, I discovered sisterhood, the bond born from shared pain that drives us to fight for a brighter future. Over time, I chose to leave a legacy. I began to write my memoirs not to judge but to heal and to motivate others. Every word written on those pages was an act of courage, a statement that no woman should settle for less than she deserves. Writing became both a refuge and a bridge towards forgiveness, not for Michael, but for myself, for the woman who had been hurt and who was now rising again with new strength. I remembered my mother and her lessons about the importance of standing strong and valuing oneself despite harsh circumstances. I realized life is a series of cycles where sometimes we must fall to learn how to rise stronger. Today my heart beats peacefully. I do not forget the past because it shaped who I am, but I also refuse to allow it to define me. I have found calm in independence and in consciously choosing to surround myself with people who respect me and love me for who I truly am. Michael lost the chance to be the son a mother deserved, but I gained the chance to rediscover myself and start a new chapter filled with hope. If anyone hears this story and feels a connection, I want you to know that you are not alone. She is alone, but dignity is not something to bargain with. Self-love stands as the foundation for any genuine connection, and it is never too late to find your voice again and write the ending you desire. Today, I walk tall with the confidence that I deserve respect and happiness. My name is Delma Perez, and this is the story of a woman who chose not to give up, who faced her pain head on, and ultimately became her own heroine. Life challenged me with difficult tests, yet it also revealed that the greatest strength lies in loving oneself, in safeguarding who we are, and in never allowing anyone to make us feel less than we truly are. This is the truth I want to share, the lesson I want to leave behind. The power to be reborn is inside each of us. We just need the courage to take the very first step.